On this week's Motor Week, we look at two performance models from the Honda stable, the Civic and Accord Type-R. If super minis are more your style and you want to be different, does the Daihatsu YRV 4-track come up with the goods? Plus, we'll be seeing if the Italians can do everyday luxury with the Alfa 166.
Hang on a minute. This is a hot hatch, right? But it's huge in here. Hello! But a gear lever mounted on the dash, well, that's MPV stuff, isn't it? And this badge, Honda. Doesn't that put us in Trilby hat territory? So are we talking about some awful MPV hot hatch hybrid about as useful and focused as a combined hat stand and cement mixer? What we're talking about here is the Honda Civic Type-R. The R stands for racing. Ooh. In fact, the Trilby business is pretty much behind Honda now. Their Type-R is a whole sub-brand in itself that started with the damned ugly but fine Integra Type-R, and then the hugely sensible but still very, very fast Accord Type-R. The Civic is their attack on the hot hatch market. It's just arrived in the UK. Not that it had to travel that far. It's made here. So these Type-R jobbers are far more than an ordinary car with a fancy badge and a set of bucket seats then. It seems Honda put some genuine graft into making them go more quickly. Ooh yes, suspension, aerodynamics, engine, body stiffness, the lot. All tweaked and all in the name of getting a serious shift on. Well, straight away this feels a world apart from some so-called hot hatches. It's direct, immediate, you can feel what's going on under the wheels, and that may sound obvious, but think of a lot of current hot hatches and really they're a bit remote and numb, you can't feel what's happening. In this, you can, it feels very close to a race car on the road. And then there's the engine. Ooh, peachy. It's a new 2-litre unit from Honda and it uses their clever VTEC technology. If you've never driven a VTEC engine, think of it this way. Around town it poodles about as if your granny's driving. Nail it though, and as soon as you get to the higher limits of the rev range, it all goes crazy. Not only do you get a fantastic noise, but it just pulls endlessly. The downside of all of this is it's a bit toppy. There's very little at the bottom end. There's still some pull, but not a lot. And if you're in the wrong gear at the wrong time, you can be left looking a bit of a bird. If you want to get technical, it produces about 200 brake horsepower, 60 miles an hour from 0 will come up in just under 7 seconds. You know, probably the most startling thing about driving this car is this gear lever on the dash. And I think it's great. It's barely inches from the wheel. It's right where your left hand falls when you want to change. It may look odd, but it works a treat. Of course, with any hot hatch, it's not just how it goes, it's how it looks, even when it's standing still. Which is when you remember the point of a hot hatch. It's got enough go to make it exciting and enough practicality to make it usable. I mean, believe me, it really is enormous in this thing. Of course, if you're going to kid your mates you're all roughy-tufty in your little Type-R, you're going to have to forget about luxuries in here like sunroof, ain't got one, cruise control, air conditioning, no, electric seats, oh no way. And if you whinge about not having them, all your mates will laugh at you for being a bit softy. If the Honda's got one strong point, it's the feel of it. Too many fast cars now are forgetting one crucial point, the sensation of speed. Sure, they can make the things go at warp speed, but if it only feels like their granny's driving, well, where's the point? All you end up with is a badly scarred licence. The Honda feels like a fast car as well as actually being one. You don't need to look at all the spoilers and fancy wheels to know that, you just need to drive it. It feels like a little race car for the road.
Tonight we're going to show you a car that could not only win you the Traffic Lights Grand Prix, but also take you and all of your mates for a night out, or if you're like me, take the family shopping. So this week we're going to be taking a look at Honda's Accord Type-R.
This latest Accord was launched in 1998, and style-wise the Type-R is subtly understated. There are of course the obligatory sports alloys and body skirts, but even those don't make much of an impact, and I'm sure that if it wasn't for the car's huge rear spoiler, you wouldn't be getting many admiring glances at all.
If indeed admiring glances is what you think you'll get because of this ridiculous huge hunk of plastic on the rear, but the real key to the thrill of the Type-R can only be found when you're on the move.
Under the Accord bonnet is Honda's now legendary VTEC engine. In this 2.2 litre form it pumps out 212 brake horsepower, which is enough to take the Accord to 60 in 7.5 seconds and onto a top speed of 145 miles per hour.
Now driving the Accord can be a bit of a Jekyll and Hyde experience. One minute you're trickling along in the rush hour traffic, the next you're driving a road-going version of a Formula One car. Well, right, that's stretching the imagination, I know, but it has got definite and tangible links to its multi-millionaire Formula One cousins. And the reason for that change is the fantastic VTEC engine. Up to about 5,000 revs, it's brisk and nondescript, but go beyond 5,000 and it is an absolutely sensational engine. I can't stress this enough. It goes from a sedentary family saloon to a brutish, screaming sports car, but you have to drive it fast. And you have to drive it at high revs. I know we've said that before, but the engine is crying out to be driven hard. You just look silly when you're driving along at high revs all the time. The transmission on this car is a fairly standard front-wheel drive setup. The handling is really nice. It's got a predictable and subtle amount of understeer, again what you'd expect. The brakes, well, they do a more than adequate job of stopping the car, and the all-round balance is very nice considering it is a car that you can get the whole family in. I still don't like that rear spoiler though, it's just ridiculous. Now the interior of the Accord is a little disappointing to say the least. Well, it's not actually, it's very disappointing, it's dull and boring. Now I know it's Japanese and they're not renowned for their design and look, but I just think with a car with a sporting prowess like this should have an interior that reflects that a little more. All of this black plastic, you know, a little bit of imitation carbon fibre or aluminium would go a long way to just make it a little more interesting, but I suppose you're paying for what you get.
In terms of competition for the Type-R, well, there aren't many real rivals. There are of course the V6 alternatives from Ford, Volkswagen and Vauxhall, but they don't really offer the same kind of driving experience as the Accord. Then there is of course the Subaru Impreza, which with a similar price and power output is possibly the Type-R's biggest rival.
One thing I do like about the Accord is the driving position. It's down low, comfortable, and it's got these Recaro sports seats that give you lots of support, and it's got one of those silly lumbar supports that support my fat back. Now, considering this car's got the best part of 220 brake horsepower, you don't feel like you're in a performance car. Some of that's down to the interior, but it's also down to the ride and the suspension. It's slightly firmer than the regular Accord, but you still don't feel like you're in anything special. But that's part of the problem, the identity crisis that is this car. It's trying to be a family saloon, but also this great brute of a sports car. And, you know, that's the price you pay. If you want to get the kids in the back, it's going to have the ride of a saloon car. Now, although we'd all love to have a Lotus or a Ferrari, the somewhat limited capabilities of those cars mean that the normal everyday to-day jobs are a bit of a problem. I mean, can you imagine putting all the shopping in a Lotus Elise or taking the family out in a Ferrari 360? No, me neither, although for obvious reasons we'd give it a go. But that's exactly what the Accord can do. And at only £21,500, what more could you want?
That's it for part one. After the break, we see if the Italians should stick to supercars as we test their luxury executive cruiser, the Alfa 166. See you soon.
It's me, Mrs. Blade Runner. But the car, well, that really is from another planet. It's the Daihatsu YRV 4-track, and it's mad. Well, it boasts, according to the blurb anyway, Audi A2 rivaling dimensions for Ford Fiesta money. So it must be good. So for just £7,995, you can slide behind the wheel and hope that nobody notices you driving one of the weirdest things on the road. That's just for the base version though. This one is special. It's the 4-track version, which means we get 4-wheel drive. Well, hey, head for the hills. More of the 4-wheel drive in a moment though, because first of all, let's find out what the heck this thing is for. Well, space, I suppose, because it may be small, but it's got loads of it. And I do mean loads. There's loads of that kind of room you get over your head for tall people or people in top hats that you get in some Japanese weirdie cars. But there's also plenty of usable room for passengers and their luggage. Now, are you sure it's clear? There's nobody going to see me driving it? Right, I'll do it. It's embarrassing. It's also about performance. We get a 1.3 litre engine with clever variable valve technology. It's actually exactly the same unit as you'll find in the Toyota Yaris. Not that surprising because Daihatsu are partly owned by Toyota. When I say performance, I don't mean speed. It will hit 60 miles an hour after about 11 seconds have gone by. What I do mean is economy. They claim it'll return 55.4 mpg, which is huge. But even back here in the real world, you could see 45, which is big. Of course, it's never going to set the world on fire in the driving department, but with that kind of economy, it's got to appeal to somebody, somewhere, surely. You'll pay £10,995 for this version, but you do get air conditioning, alloys and a CD player. Have you ever found yourself sitting somewhere, anywhere, pub, train station, doesn't matter, and had the nagging feeling that somebody, somewhere, is watching you? Well, driving this YRV is a bit like that. I just get the impression that whilst I'm driving, things are happening and being monitored that I don't know about. There is the clever four-wheel drive system which can put the torque from the front to the rear wheels depending upon demand, but then, I don't know, it all feels a bit too clever. On the whole, it may look, well, damned weird, but it makes a kind of sense. There is enormous space, it's cheap to run, it'll probably be very reliable, and you'll never lose your car in a car park again, no matter how hard you try. So, how does it actually measure up against the Audi A2? Well, if we needed any further proof that they really are nuts at Daihatsu, it's here in the blurb. It says the following. Let me quote, YRV's dimensions, blah, 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 assets, blah, small cars, blah, Audi A2. Right, here we go. For example, the A2 is only 56 millimetres wider than the YRV, the width of an average tea bag. Tea bag? What have they been doing, smoking them? The Alfa Romeo 166 3-litre V6. Like every other Alfa, it gets you right here. And that's the problem. Thing is, it should be so good. I mean, it's got everything in its favour. For a start, it's big. Pretty much as big as a BMW 5 Series, in fact. It actually feels comfortably sized as well. It doesn't feel tinny and small. You feel you're in something substantial and solid with plenty of road presence. And it is undeniably stylish. And also it's not short of go. Because it certainly isn't underpowered. This particular version has a 3-litre V6, which apart from sounding glorious, which it does, it also provides plenty of oomph right through the rev range. Wherever you are in whatever gear, there's always power to hand. Oh, and talking about the gears, we've got 6 of them. They're not the slickest operating thing in the world, but they ain't bad. And no one can say it isn't a good drive either. Because it is a good drive. It's not a hot hatch if that's what you're expecting, and it's not as sharp perhaps as the image of the car. But what it is a very fluid drive. It's more of a proper Grand Tourer, something that feels at home loping along the autobahns, but also when things get a bit twisty, you can have some fun. It's very adjustable. Lift off the throttle and you can feel the tail come out gently, but if you stab the throttle again and put the power back to the front wheels, it'll all step back into line, gather it up, and you don't stick it up a tree, which is handy. And of course, let's not forget, it is an Alfa Romeo, with all of the proud pedigree and history that brings, and if nothing else, it is a mighty fine badge to have displayed on your key fob. So it's every inch the stylish, fast Italian saloon car, in fact. So where's the problem? Well, the problem lies in several places. For a start, it's here. And it's here. And here. The interior doesn't necessarily look too bad, but it feels, well, rather cheap. The plastics used are brittle and tacky. What you don't get is a sense of occasion. Whilst most modern Alfa Romeo have deservedly cast off their reputation for rusting faster than a fisherman's pocket knife, the 166 still has its name firmly stuck in the register at the old school. It's pretty, yes, but it just ain't all that sturdily screwed together when you compare it to more modern kit. And then there's the final problem, the one that really finishes it. Yeah. Well, when I say it gets you here, I don't mean your heart, because in the stirring the emotions side of things, well, there's no problem. It's an Alfa Romeo, of course it does that. What I mean is it gets you here. I mean, here, in the wallet. Because it's going to cost you for this particular top spec version £27,500, which is serious Audi money or even BMW or Mercedes. But the bit where it really hurts is when in a few years' time you come to sell a thing. Because 3 years from now you'd be hard pressed to get more than a third of your money back. Ouch! Now that really does hurt.
If you think size is important, they don't come much bigger than the Chrysler Grand Voyager. Check out the road test next week.